Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it again with another Wuthering Waves Cyberpunk collaboration video. And the collaboration at this point has already occurred for a couple of days. And our goal for today is to actually break down, well, how well was this collaboration received? What impact did it actually make in Wuthering Waves? What impact did it make in the marketplace across various stores worldwide? And of course, what impact did it actually make for the overall success of the space? And so we're going to be going through a bunch of different metrics, a bunch of different reveals about how this collab has actually been received so that we can kind of come to like a final breakdown of, did Kuro actually do a good job? Did they hit the mark on everything that they wanted to? Or were there maybe some areas where they fell a bit short? So without further ado, we're going to go ahead. We're going to get right into it and just get ourselves started off with some of the biggest news that we got on the release of this patch. Yes, according to pink-haired Nanami at least, and their regional Steam page, WuWa is currently ranking #1 on Steam in USA and #2 on the global Steam top sellers list. And as you can see over here, this is a bit of an accomplishment to make. And I've talked about this accomplishment a couple of times because Wuthering Waves is one of the only games that has successfully actually brought down Counter-Strike 2, the game that you're seeing over here, from the #1 rating. And the explanation is very simple. Counter-Strike 2 is basically a gambling simulator, where instead of actually going around and shooting people like an FPS, you buy keys from a store, roll on crates, pull exclusive weapon and knife skins, and then go sell them for real-life cash. So from the perspective of this, it's like a gacha, but you can sell your pulls that you get afterwards and actually make money. A lot different from a character collecting game like this, right? Where there's no aftermarket value for your pulls. You can see why this game is always at the top, right? It's basically like its own marketplace, its own ecosystem, its own economy. So yeah, there being a lot of spending because that basically puts money into like the game's ecosystem makes a lot of sense. Wallet Strike 2, you're right. And so a game beating it in terms of spending is kind of fucking crazy at a baseline. And this just doesn't happen very often at all. The only other time Wuthering Waves has topped Counter-Strike 2 before was during one instance, ladies and gentlemen. And you want to know what it was for? It was for the release of one unit. And you might know the unit. Yeah, it was for her. Imith is the one that got the #1 spot from Counter-Strike 2.
Cool, right?
She's the only one in the history of the game. And now the Cyberpunk collab has actually done the same thing. And what do we know about Imith and her revenue and her success? She was the most successful banner in the history of the game. Yes, that is how Kuro Games described it. Imith was actually the highest earned, like, I think highest grosser in the history of the game, which makes sense because, I mean, I don't even need to show. She got fucking robot, bro. That shit is badass. So with this as a baseline, right? And with that kind of like past knowledge already ready to go, you should already know at a baseline that at least on Steam, at least, you know, in the US, it's being well recognized. However, there are some other metrics that we can take a look at. There are some other things that can make this a bit clear. We got Wuthering Waves on the popularity list on a website called Bilibili. And if you want to know what Bilibili is essentially like the Chinese version of YouTube, where a bunch of different games, a lot of them, right? You can see some of the top gacha titles in the space, and then I guess like a game for girls over here, gay guys. That's kind of odd. I don't know why this one's in second place. What are the rest of these games doing? The more talked about a game is, and the more popular a game is, the higher it actually shows up over here. So yeah, that's another metric, another place where the Edgerunners collab is really making some waves. Then you got some additional support over here. Apparently, the story over here, it's canon. That's neat. And this is the big one. And I think this is the big one that really needs to be followed for quite a while. The player count has broken records during the collab on Steam. And this is the reality that people should see from here. This is not like an insane number of players relative to the whole of the game. However, for one platform that got introduced late, I believe in version 2.5, this is a rather impressive turn up, and this is a rather impressive show out. And like you can see, relative to other patches, you can see how popular the Sigrika one was. Yeah, that doesn't look particularly that great, does it? Yeah, that doesn't look particularly that amazing. And remember when I said 3.1 was the highest revenue record? This is just to show that player count doesn't necessarily translate into best sellers on Steam. Because Imeth was one of the best sellers in the history of the game, but then her player count number, right? Actually lower than 3.3 and actually lower than 3.0. And you can see this Edge Runners collab, well, it's taking the top spot. Kind of impressive. And when you see the takes that people make as they go through this quest, you can see like the opportunity to take a photo with Ling Yang by Sacksweat, UID 505774. You know what I mean? Nicholas Light, Sacksweat. People love this story. They had an amazing time. I can't see a single response from any CC where they're like upset by the collab or think that like the story's bad or that it was a bad experience. I think the main take that people can have is that it was a great one that could definitely be improved in some ways, had maybe a couple of like pacing things that could be worked out, but overall it's an incredibly positive experience. When there's nothing really detracting and there's nobody that's really, you know, pointing out anything horrifically flawed, and there's nothing to really point out that's like giga bad, it's just light criticism, opportunities to improve, and of course, even more PR. And that's really just the case. And I think the reality over here is that we just need to take some time to account for the actual raw numbers. Because yes, I've been showing a lot of outward-facing things, right? I've been showing that people seem to love the patch. It's a cult classic. It's reaching top #1 spots in a bunch of places, and it's breaking player count records. But what's the actual turnout? Right? What's the actual revenue numbers looking like? What's the actual like financial impact? And of course, the success of the banners. Because this is the unfortunate thing. You could be a game that has 7 billion players, but if none of them spend money, your game will end of service. You could be the most popular game ever, played by everybody, but if nobody pays any money and you make no revenue, the game will end service. This collab could possibly be the most popular one ever that everyone loves. But what's something that happened during it? Rebecca got given out for free.
Yo!
And so did people want to pull Lucy?
Need some.
Let's find out. So we got this post over here showing WuWa day 1 revenue performance for Lucy and Rebecca. That part of it is like cut off over here. It's a big ass post. But the main thing you'll see is that you can't see any of the countries. I asked Grok over here to actually go ahead and translate all of that data for us so that we can see kind of like the top 10 countries, at least in terms of like ranking, how the collab performed. And the top winners are South Korea, Hong Kong, China 2, Japan, Singapore, China 1 at number 6, 20. And then you start getting into some more, traditionally like kind of like, well, later placements. And this is something that you see over here. You're seeing countries like Australia, Canada, United States, they're in like the 50s. This is normal for a gacha game. I don't think that there's ever been a time in history when a gacha title has like broken past 20 in any of these like more Western regions, because Westerners pay way more money on like Western apps. So yeah, we just have like a lot more spending overall, and way less of it is on like these like kind of like Chinese games. So you can actually consider like results like these for the Western countries to actually be comparable to results like these in some of the Eastern ones. We're also broke, so it's like, yeah, we need to spend money on food, not games. You can get what's going on over here, right? And so this is the analysis that somebody decided to do given that data. Why don't we look at it together? And of course, credits to whatever's going on over here. I just want to read some of the parts because they were able to break it all down. So essentially, these are the main pointers. And I think these are really, really important to keep in mind. The collab has been very useful in attracting attention and bringing new players to the game. It's breaking download records, concurrent player counts, all of that stuff. We've seen that everywhere. However, this is kind of like the spin-off, and this is kind of like the dagger part of the situation. On the other hand, the revenue impact, at least on mobile, and remember, that's going to be juxtaposed to Steam doing very well, seems weaker than I personally expected, with at least, that data being based on day 1 rankings. With a 10th place in Japan and a 20th place in China, I would call it an average or good, but not really on the same level of WuWa's top hitters like Cartithia and Imeth. So I think the best way for us to do a comparison over here is to get Imeth day 1 sales, JP, blah, blah, blah. Here we go. This is going to be perfect. This is an example of what Imeth's data looked like on that website. And by aggregate ranking, this is what this means. First place, 2 total. First place, 31 total. That is essentially the number of, like, countries. That's essentially, like, the number of countries where it was first place when this banner dropped. You can see over here on this chart, the Cyberpunk collab banner is kind of just not first place, like, anywhere relative to the iMyth banner, where it was first place in a bunch of different fucking areas. That's why it made so much goddamn money. And it's also, remember, one of the most popular banners in the history of the game. So, like, just from, like, a raw numbers perspective, I don't think this person is, like, wrong. There are a lot more players joining, especially from, like, that audience that didn't know much about WuWa, but maybe knew about Cyberpunk. But, guys, there's also the possibility of people that know WuWa maybe don't know Cyberpunk, and then maybe they are not that into the collab or the characters, and so they don't want to pull. And this is the thing. You kind of only have one thing to pull on in this patch, guys. Realistically, it's Lucy. There's not a lot of people that are probably going to go ahead and decide to pull Rebecca, right? Or, oh, that's compared to the game banner? Oh, sorry. Quick correction to make over here. This isn't based off the country rankings. This is based off of all the previous rankings of prior characters. I mean, I basically said that before. This is basically saying out of all 31 characters that have ever been recorded on this website, iMyth is the #1 out of all of them. It's based off of the WuWa units, not the countries. Just getting that clarified real fast. So yeah, this is just, she's the most popular character in the history of the game. That's essentially it. That's what first place means over here. So now, going back to it, the only unit that we actually realistically will pull is Lucy and her weapon. But do you want to know something about Lucy that's really going to, like, fuck up her sales in the gacha market? Knowing that people, you're not even allowed to have, like, playable characters talk to another male character on screen, or people will think they're getting cucked. Yeah, you're pretty much gonna run into an issue when you try to, like, sell a character that has a boyfriend. Yeah, I'm sorry, bro. Lucy in lore is basically married to this guy. And Kuro Games decided to make her the one you pull for. Guys, this is the one that's single. You might be surprised, given her friendliness and amicability, she's actually the one that's single. But she's the one that got given out for free. She's free and single. This one has a boyfriend, and you had to pull for them. It's wild for a gacha to try to sell a character, make a banner for a character that's, like, in a relationship. That's why Alice has been delayed for so long in Genshin Impact, because she got, like, a husband or some shit. Bro, they might just never fucking put that bitch up. And this is what happened here. And so is it that wild, or is it, like, that surprising, right? To see that in, like, one of the regions over here, known for gacha spending, that also kind of, like, happens to be, like, really expressing, like, that incelly, bro, like, I can't pull characters unless they're single sort of vibe. That's, like, really where it's big, right? They don't want the used goods. They don't want the secondhand smoke. They don't want the sloppy second, as they do say. And it could also be the fact that these guys maybe aren't top meta characters, because that's also true. They're not broken. They're not ridiculous. And so maybe from the meta side of China as well, they're just not huge fans. And this could be the final bit over here, right? Or this could maybe just be the realistic one. Some people like Wuthering Waves, and they maybe just don't like Edgerunners. They just don't like the collab, and units like this just aren't something that they actually want on their account. And that's entirely possible too. But I think the reality here is very, very, very simple. Kuro Games took one of the most interesting risks that I feel like I've ever seen a gacha company do with this collaboration over here. They made, like, a character free. They, like, were going in and they were kind of, like, you know, creating these units, right? They were, like, creating these stories where they just, like, shoved, bro, this shit right into your fucking face. And you might be saying, Saint, you're just saying a bunch of bullshit right now. Saber is married to Shiro. Rin is married to Shiro. They're all married to Shiro in Fate. And so Honkai Star Rail and, like, Hoyoverse, they're making collab characters that are in relationships. Why do you think Shiro isn't in any of the collab stories? Because they're trying to make you forget that, like, he's, like, dating both of them, right? In the different arcs. Bro, the entire story of, like, the Cyberpunk quest is about how Lucy can't get over David. Lucy can't get over her dead ex. 3 hours. The entire quest, Lucy, because she can't get over her dead ex. there's a decent part of the population that would just be like, yo, that's another man. That's another man's stuff. I'm good. I ain't pulling that shit. And that's the reality of it. Because they made the characterization of her the loss of David. And the loss of Rebecca, and of course, like the loss of her crew, but mostly the loss of David. And that drives the entire fucking story. This quest is a continuation of Edge Runners Season 1. It's basically the episode 11. And they decided to use that as like a vehicle, right? They decided to use that as a vehicle to like deliver the characters. And part of me is saying, yes, this was an absolute like cinematic masterpiece. They did a great job with it. It's one of the most well storyboarded quests ever. But was it a good quest to sell gacha characters? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not entirely sure. Because we all know that this isn't something that gacha devs do. They don't put like collab banners up or just banners up and then fucking like make their entire characterization that they're in a relationship with somebody else. That's rough. That's crazy, right? But Kuro Games did it here. And I think they did a decent job with it. And when you look at the metrics for a lot of countries, right? You look at the metrics for a lot of different areas and you see the actual results. I think the numbers will actually speak louder than words when we do eventually get them at the end of the month to see at a baseline how the collaboration's doing. Because on the mobile side, a lot of regions that look solid. On the PC side, a lot of regions that look great. But one thing that's clear, guys, is that this is not really at the level of our iMyths, our Cardatheas, our stuff like that. And I think this isn't going to be like one of those banners that like explodes in popularity more as like the kind of like patch goes on. Kind of like how iMyths and Cards did. But we'll see. But yeah, personally, I don't see this as like the craziest, highest revenue patch in the history of the game. I would be actually comfortably surprised if it even beats a patch like, honestly, like a 3.0 or like a 2.8 or something like that. I could actually see it being very comparable to like a Chisa banner. Maybe like a... maybe a bit lower than Hiyuki, maybe a Frolova or something like that. But I don't think it's going to be one that like dramatically like changes the game. Because are there going to be a lot of people S6ing Lucy? I don't think so. I don't think a lot of people want to S6 like somebody else's girlfriend. Would you? Are you going to pick up one copy? And maybe your weapon? Maybe. But you don't need to do a lot of spending to get one copy of them and their weapon. So yeah. I think that the S6 bait, all of that, the traditional whaling that you might have, I don't think it's actually going to occur on this banner. Because of the reasons that I listed before. But Kuro making a sacrifice like this, deciding to, right, kind of like betray the parasocialism of the gacha community, putting in somebody's girlfriend into the game, and then ask you to spend thousands of dollars on her. It's wild. There's a reason why companies don't do it. But I guess this just goes to show that Kuro and Cyberpunk and this update and this collab, it's changing everything. Literally changing everything. And who knows? Maybe this is what breaks the mold and really gets us to like that next level of innovation, much like how pretty much everything Kuro has done over the past years, the past couple of years since WuWa's come out. Maybe romance bait. Maybe pulling somebody's boyfriend or pulling somebody's girlfriend is the new meta. Who knows? Maybe we're all going to be cucks now. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.